At 630 pounds, every breath felt like a negotiation. I remember the first time I truly understood how far I'd let myself go, not as a number on a scale, but as the way the hallway light looked when I leaned against the wall to catch my breath. The house felt too small for me. The doorway seemed like an accusation. My body, once a thing that carried me through life, had become a landscape of limitations, and I was a stranger in my own skin.
I grew up in a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and frying oil, where celebrations and consolations both came with a plate. Food was love. It was quiet, warm, and immediate. When my father lost his job and my mother worked 2 shifts, mashed potatoes and meatloaf filled the gaps left by words we didn't have time to say. In high school, I wasn't athletic, but I wasn't ashamed either. As my weight crept up, it did so with the slow insistence of comfort. Each extra pound layered over the last, like bricks laid one by one until I found myself building a wall I couldn't climb over. By the time I met Maya, I had already been living with extra weight for years. She fell in love with my laugh, the way I could make friends at any party, the small kindnesses I did without thinking. She saw things I didn't see. She didn't see a problem at first. She saw me. We moved in together because it felt right, because 2 people with messy pasts made a kind of home. In the beginning, she was my partner in late-night pizza orders and movie marathons. She loved every version of me, or at least I thought she did. Love, though, is a long story, not a single moment. As the pounds mounted, the dynamics shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first. A hand to help up from the couch. A grocery list rewritten, so there was more comfort food. Then it became routine. I needed her for things I used to do alone. She would tie my shoes, unhook my seatbelt, lift blankets off my legs. There were nights she would wake to me gasping, the oxygen leaving my lungs in sharp little waves, and she would be there with a glass of water, a palm at my back, whispering, "Breathe with me, baby." She did it without complaint, but I could see the lines of worry etching deeper around her eyes. The hardest part wasn't the physical help. The hardest part was watching her give up parts of herself to keep me alive. Maya stopped going to some of her evening classes because getting me settled could take an hour. She didn't invite friends over because the stairs were a challenge for me, and I could feel the judgment in their stares. She started carrying an extra bag, of clothes, of supplies, as if she were packing for both of us. The day she bought a second, larger mattress so we could sleep together without me rolling off the side, and the hardware store had to custom make a frame, I felt foundering under the realization that my body was rewriting our lives. There were many times when I wanted to change. I wanted to get better for her, for my parents, for the job interviews I stopped going to, for the children I feared I might never have. But wanting and doing are different. I had tried diets before. I had tried medication. I had tried walking for 5 minutes and feeling proud, then embarrassed when a neighbor drove past and I had to rest against a mailbox. And every failure fed the same old cycle: shame, then comfort eating to soothe the shame, then more shame. The turning point came not as a single event, but as a slow crescendo. One evening, after a small argument about something that didn't matter, bills or a missed call, Maya sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling just enough that I noticed. "I can't keep doing this all the time," she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was exhausted. "I love you. I need you to fight for yourself. I can't be your strength every single day." Those words landed with the force of truth. For a while I clung to denial. She meant the practical things, the late-night lifting. She didn't mean that she couldn't sustain the emotional weight. But denial is porous. The more I watched her smile through the strain, the more I understood that my choices had become a burden she never asked for. Love had given her patience. It deserved an answer. The next morning, I called our family doctor. It took 3 people to get me into the office: Maya, a neighbor who helped carry me to the car, and an assistant who wheeled in an extra wide chair. The doctor was gentle and direct. He spoke of cardiac risk, of sleep apnea, of joints ravaged by constant strain. He didn't scold. He said things a person needs to hear, that change was possible, that it would not be quick, that it would require honest work. He spoke about a team, nutritionists, therapists, physical trainers, and in some cases, surgeons. The word surgery clanged in my ears, frightening and oddly hopeful. It was a tool, he said, not magic. I left the clinic with a folder that felt heavier than the weight itself. It had pamphlets and phone numbers and a prescription for blood tests. On the ride home, Maya held my hand, and I thought of all the little ways she had made my life livable. I did not want the story of us to be a tale of sacrifice. I wanted to be an active character again, not the person people planned around. The first weeks were the worst because I expected dramatic change overnight. I would lie awake and plot the perfect meal, the perfect walk, imagining I could will my body into shrinking. But the body had its own timetable, and I had to learn to respect it. Our first victory was small. I sat up without calling for her help. It took effort, a calculation of balance and willpower, but I did it. We celebrated with 2 cups of herbal tea and a long, honest conversation. She told me she would always help me when I needed it, but she wanted to see me try for myself. We hired a nutritionist who didn't bring a list of forbidden foods, but instead asked me about my life. She asked what I wanted, what scared me, what comfort tasted like to me. We started a plan with measurable steps, not impossibilities. Instead of saying, "Never eat sugar again," she taught me about portions, about substitutions, about the ritual of cooking as an act of care, not punishment. For the first time, food became a skill to learn, not just a refuge. Exercise began as impossible, then humiliating, then hopeful. The physical therapist came to our home and designed a program I could do from a chair. Gentle leg lifts, seated marches, resistance bands that weren't threatening. The first time I used the bands, my muscles shook in a way that felt like muscles' honest reply. "You asked for this, now you must listen." 2 minutes turned into 5, 5 into 10. Maya counted my repetitions, not with judgment, but like a partner cheering at a small finish line. Therapy was the hardest pill to accept. I had always thought my problems were physical, that if I controlled my body, it would fix everything else. But the therapist asked me to talk about the early food memories, about the loneliness I had disguised with snacks, about the shame that told me I was less deserving. I cried in that office in a way I hadn't since I was a child. Talking didn't make the pounds drop, but it loosened the grip that shame had on my choices. It made me kinder to myself. Even with this new structure, setbacks happened. I had nights of binging, of feeling like an imposter in my own recovery. I would wake with regret and guilt, ready to give up, ready to crawl back into old habits. Maya would sit beside me and hold my hand. She never said, "See, I told you so." She said, "Okay, what will you do tomorrow?" The question shifted the narrative from failure to plan. There were practical battles, too. I had to learn how to ask for help without surrendering. Asking for adjustments at restaurants or for wider seats was humiliating at times. But I also learned that most people offer kindness when you let them see your truth. We replaced the late-night delivery menus with a list of simple meals we could make together. Cooking became an act of co-creation, chopping, tasting, laughing through small mistakes. It was messy and necessary. As the weeks turned into months, the numbers on the scale began to move, slowly and stubbornly, like a tide changing over a season. Each pound lost felt like a small reclamation, not a victory over food, but an affirmation of my agency. I celebrated with non-food rewards, a new pair of shoes that actually fit, a haircut that made me feel like someone worthy of care. a photograph of Maya and me smiling without effort. But the real change was not the weight alone. It was the reclamation of my role in our relationship. I stopped waiting for Maya to be my caretaker and started being her partner again. I learned to recognize when I was using exhaustion as an excuse to avoid harder work. I began to join her in tasks I had once shrugged off. The intimacy that returned between us was quieter, truer. It wasn't dramatic, no movie montage transformations, but it was real, stitched together by everyday choices. I am not done yet. At 630 pounds, I was at a point of crisis. At the start of this story, I was still very close to that place of immobility. But I chose to fight for myself, not to prove anything to anyone, but to be present for a life I still wanted. The road ahead is long, and there will be more hard days. There will be times I will doubt myself and nights when the weight of the past presses hardest. But there are also mornings now when I wake without dread, when Maya and I plan the day like two people building something together. The journey wasn't a straight line, and I never expected it to be. Some days felt like triumph, others felt like setbacks. But every step forward was proof that I could still write my own story. I remember the first morning I woke up and realized I had slept through the night without gasping for air. It sounds small, but for me, it was everything. Maya noticed before I did. She smiled and said, "You didn't scare me awake last night." That sentence felt like a gift. Little milestones became our way of measuring progress. The day I walked to the mailbox without stopping, I came back inside and cried, not from exhaustion but from pride. When I managed to bend down and tie my own shoes again, Maya clapped like I had just won an Olympic medal. Each little victory reminded me that I was taking my life back, piece by piece. But recovery isn't just about the body, it's about the mind. There were days I felt angry at myself for letting it get this far. There were days I resented the process, the slowness, the hunger, and the endless discipline. Some mornings I wanted to give up, crawl back under the covers, and let the cycle continue. But every time I looked at Maya, I saw the truth. Giving up would not just cost me my health, it would cost me the future we dreamed of together. We had talked about marriage, about kids, about traveling. Those dreams had felt impossible at 630 pounds. Now, as I began to regain control, those dreams came alive again. I imagined walking down an aisle without needing someone to support me. I imagined chasing after a child in the park instead of watching from a chair. I imagined sitting on an airplane seat without fear or shame. These visions pulled me forward when my body wanted to quit. One of the hardest parts was learning to let go of the shame. I used to walk into a room and assume everyone was staring at me, judging me, mocking me. In truth, maybe some were, but most were just living their own lives. The real enemy wasn't their gaze, it was my own self-hatred. Therapy helped me see that I had to forgive myself for the years of neglect, for the choices I made when I didn't know how to cope. Forgiveness wasn't about letting myself off the hook, it was about giving myself permission to change. Slowly, the scale kept moving. 630 pounds became 600, then 580. The numbers weren't everything, but they were a marker of progress. My doctor reminded me not to obsess over the pace. What mattered was sustainability. It wasn't about losing weight fast, it was about losing it for good. I took that advice to heart. Maya became more than just my fiancée, she became my partner in every sense of the word. We created new rituals together. Instead of late-night fast food runs, we took evening walks, even if they were short. Instead of celebrating with cake, we celebrated with experiences, driving out to watch sunsets, exploring small parks, or just sitting together and talking about how far we had come. Our relationship grew stronger because it wasn't built on dependency anymore. It was built on shared effort, on both of us choosing to fight for the life we wanted. But I won't lie to you, there were nights I relapsed. There were nights I found myself in front of the fridge at 2 a.m., grabbing food I didn't need. There were mornings I skipped workouts, convincing myself I deserved a break. The old habits never disappeared completely. They waited in the shadows. The difference now was that I didn't let them control me forever. I admitted my slip-ups to Maya. I admitted them to myself. And then I moved forward. That was new for me. Before, a single failure would send me spiraling for weeks. Now, failure was just a bump in the road. Support also came from unexpected places. When I shared pieces of my journey online, strangers began to message me. People who were struggling with their own weight, people who felt hopeless, people who saw themselves in my story. They told me my fight gave them courage to start theirs. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about me. Every pound I lost, every milestone I achieved, became a message of hope for someone else out there who was still trapped in their own body, waiting to believe they could change. Months passed, and I began to see myself differently. The man in the mirror no longer looked like someone waiting to die. He looked like someone learning to live. My clothes fit differently. My steps grew steadier. I no longer needed Maya to help me get dressed, or to lift me out of bed. I could do those things myself. That independence, as small as it seemed, gave me back my dignity. The real turning point came one afternoon when Maya and I went to the park. It had been years since I had gone anywhere like that. I sat on a bench, nervous, worried about people staring. But instead of stares, I noticed something else. Kids running, couples walking, people laughing, and no one cared about me. I stood up, slowly, and walked across the grass. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't fast, but it was me, moving under my own strength. I turned back and saw Maya watching me, tears in her eyes. That moment, right there, was the first time I believed I was truly getting my life back. Today, I'm still on the journey. I haven't reached my final goal yet, but I've come so far from that man who needed help just to get through the day. I no longer measure myself only by the scale, but by what I can do, by the freedom I feel, by the love I can now give back without being weighed down by guilt and shame. At 630 pounds, I was trapped. I needed my fiancée's care day and night just to survive. But I made a choice, the hardest choice of my life. I chose to fight for myself. Not just for weight loss, but for love, for dignity, for hope, and for the future I still want. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. No matter how heavy your burdens are, you are not powerless. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen perfectly. But it does happen, step by step, choice by choice, with every breath you take when you decide you want to live. And that's my story. From 630 pounds to a life I'm still building, one day at a time.